Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Pre-built versus custom built, battle of the gaming PCs. Today we're looking at two $900 computers. On this side of the table, we have the $900 CyberPowerPC that I've previously done a video on. More is coming. Link to the playlist on that down in the video description below if you'd like to see a closer look at this. But in essence, it's a $900 pre-built gaming PC that you can buy off of Amazon. Link to that in the video description below as well. It's a very nice, well-rounded machine, 1080p and even 1440p gaming. We'll talk more about its specs in just a minute. On this side of the table, we have a custom PC. This is a collection of components that we have to put together, and I am going to build this in a future build video. Not here. We're talking about the parts and the relative value of the two and performance rather than actually doing a build in this video, but that will come at some point in the future, and when it does, that'll be linked down in the video description below as well. There are pros and cons to each of these. There's reasons to buy a pre-built, there's reasons to custom build, there are things that you get with a pre-built you don't with a custom and vice versa. You can certainly choose your components and make it the way you want, but that comes at the cost of having to assemble it. But that's what we're really looking at today, is which should you buy? And the answer might surprise some of you. It is not black and white. It is not as simple as, oh, don't be crazy, always custom build. Absolutely not. Some of you watching this video should buy a pre-built. You are not good candidates for a custom build. Others of you watching this video absolutely should never buy a pre-built. You would never be happy with it. It would drive you nuts, and you should custom build. So the answer very much is, it depends. And that's what this video is more meant to be about. I am going to talk about the parts and why I chose them and the pros and cons of them, but I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about who should be on the left side of the table and who should be on the right side of the table. First, let me run down the specs really quick before we get into the why of why everything is here. The pre-built CyberPowerPC has an i5-9400F 6-core, 6-thread, 4.1 GHz max clock speed CPU. The F means it has no integrated graphics, but it doesn't matter because we have a wonderful dedicated add-in graphics card here. The CPU is installed on an ASRock B360M motherboard. It has a 120 gigabyte Western Digital Green SSD and then a 1 terabyte Western Digital Blue 7200 RPM hard drive. We have 8 gigabytes of main system RAM, and we have a Zotac GTX 1660 Ti 6 gigabyte GDDR6 graphics card. That's the brand new Turing card, which was just released, minus the ray tracing cores, but otherwise all the new features of the 20 series, just minus the RTX technologies. It has a 500 watt power supply, it has Wi-Fi, it comes with Windows 10 Home pre-installed, it has a gamery style keyboard. It is a cheap keyboard, but it's got gamer keys and dedicated function keys. It's better than what comes with an Acer or Dell these days. And it's got an RGB mouse, which is very exciting. It's installed in a Cooler Master Masterbox Lite 5.1 RGB case. There's an RGB fan in the back, and there are 3 in the front. And if you price those, they're not cheap. And these are full ring RGB fans. They're not just like little RGB lights in the center. I did some B-roll footage of that. It's really beautiful. That's in the video link down in the description below. This is $900. The core components of this computer can be purchased for $750 minus keyboard, mouse, Windows license, and Wi-Fi adapter. Remove those 4 items and you're at about $750, except the RGB lights in here are a little bit of an upgrade over what you'd get from Cooler Master, but that's a minor thing. So you can build this for a bit less, or you can build a bit nicer for the same money if you subtract keyboard, mouse, Wi-Fi, and Windows. Windows licenses, by the way, especially for this, link down in the video description below. Very inexpensively. I've done dedicated videos on that in the past, so you don't have to spend $100 to get a Windows license if you don't want to. Now that's the pre-built computer. The custom-built PC is a bit different. Ryzen 5 2600X, 6 cores, 12 threads, 4.2 gigahertz max clock speed. Its main claim to fame is its hyper-threading, although it's not called hyper-threading because that's an Intel trademark term. It's SMT, it's symmetrical multi-threading. It is 100 megahertz faster than the i5-9400 with slightly lower per clock performance. Per core, per thread, the i5-9400F and the Ryzen 5 2600X are effectively identical performance. Close enough, it doesn't matter. Except that we have 12 threads. Better multitasking, better multi-threaded support, better content creation support. It doesn't make a huge difference for gaming, but there's a little bit of smoothness in there from having the extra threads. It definitely is a nice feature. It does come with a better cooler. The Wraith Spire cooler, there's no RGB on it, but it is a much, much better cooler than the Intel one that's included, although the Intel one gets more hate than it deserves. It does the job, and when the cover's on the computer and it's on the floor or not next to you 1 foot away, it really isn't that audible, so there's that. We are installing the Ryzen 5 onto this MSI X470 Gaming Plus motherboard. Please note, my $900 budget for this machine doesn't actually allow for an X470. I have the B450 version of the Gamer Plus priced. It's $30 less expensive. All of these are linked down in the video description below to Amazon and Newegg. The reason why the X470 is on the desk, I don't have a B450 Gaming Plus. MSI sent me the X470, so this is all I can put on the desk and it's all I can do the build with. From a gaming performance point of view, there's no difference between those two boards. B450 or X470, it's not going to make any difference with this level of CPU. The X470 does have SLI support and a couple of other features that are nice to have, and maybe you care, maybe you don't. And this kind of gets in, we'll get into this more in a minute, but this is one of the benefits of a custom PC. You don't have to build this the way I'm building it. The CyberPower, it comes one way. Well, actually, it comes 27 different ways because there's a lot of different CyberPowers that you can buy on Amazon and directly through their site. But this level of components only comes in this configuration. There's not a $930 version with a Z370 or Z390 board. There's not an $870 version with something removed. This configuration is $900, period. If you want to customize it, do it after you buy it. So in this case, I'm putting this here simply because it's what I have on my shelf. I don't have the B450, but to get this to $900, I had to price it as if it was a B450. And I wouldn't mind building it with one if I had it. As far as system RAM, we are custom building so we can put 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM. This is far superior to the 8 gigabytes of DDR4 2666, which is included in the pre-built. However, $40 will upgrade that to 16, so it's not a huge deal these days, and the lock chip doesn't support over that anyway. But 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 is in this price point. Storage is one of the best ways to customize a custom build computer. Instead of going with a SSD hard drive combination, I managed to squeeze a nearly 1 terabyte SSD into this build. There is no hard drive in here, 960 gigabyte SU630 from ADATA. It is a budget drive. It is a bit slower than some of the mainstream drives, an SU800, for example, or a Samsung 860 EVO or a Crucial MX500. Those will be a bit faster. And if you've got the money and you don't mind spending an extra $30 or so, by all means, buy one of those drives. They are objectively faster. I'm trying to hold to the $900 price point. Compromises have to be made. So we went with the SU630, which in my opinion makes a spectacular game drive. Ideally, you'd put a faster boot drive in here and you would use this as a game drive. And spoiler alert, that's actually what I'm going to do because I will make some customizations to this when I build it. But for the $900 price point, it's just the SU630 at 960 gigs. No hard drive because frankly in 2019, the only use for spinning Rust is archive and backup. I don't run programs or games off of hard drives anymore because they're awful. For a video card, we have the same level video card that CyberPower provides. And this is really where the benchmarks are going to come into play, equalizing out the graphics cards and making it about the CPUs and RAM and maybe a few other features. The MSI Gaming X GTX 1660 Ti. I have already reviewed the non-Ti version of this card, and I have to say the Gaming X cooler is spectacular. This card, however, is $30 more expensive than the base level cards, than say this Zotac over here, which is not their amp or factory overclocked model. That's the stock model because that's what comes in pre-builts. So you are paying a bit of a premium. While the Gaming X is more money, I do believe at a $900 price point, it's worth the extra $30. $30 is 3% of the price of this entire build. And for that money, you get a video card that is faster, quieter, cooler, and cooler looking than the stock ones. I genuinely was impressed when I reviewed the non-TI version of the Gaming X. It's effectively the same card. There's slightly differences between the TI and non-TI version, but this cooler is so much nicer than some of the base ones. If you're looking for a pretty build, a silent build, and above all else, a fast build, this is one of the very few cards that ran at nearly 2 gigahertz out of the box without any factory, without any manual overclocking. I was genuinely impressed, so I think it's worth the $30. For power supply, I'm going with one that I have used many times in the past, the EVGA BT450 80 Plus Bronze power supply. This build right here will probably pull about 250 watts under full load, and that's assuming full CPU load and full graphics card load. You're normally not going to get full load on both at the same time. You'll either get content creation or some other activity like video rendering that will max out the CPU but not the graphics card, or you'll be playing a game and you'll max out the graphics card and not the CPU. I would expect this computer most of the time to be under 200 watts. That genuinely is plenty of power supply. But of course, it's your computer. You can build what you want. Now for the case, we're going with a Cooler Master case. This is the MasterBox 500, and it is in basically every way except price superior to the MasterBox Lite 5.1. Most notably, notice the mesh down in the front? There are 2 fans in the front instead of 3 fans in here. However, because of the mesh, the airflow is far, far superior. And there's mounts inside to mount liquid coolers and additional fans if you want to change that around. But you do have mesh in the front. It does come with an exhaust fan in the back, and it does come with mesh in the top, which this one doesn't. This case here is about, $25 more expensive than something like this. I think it's worth every penny. Changing your case is the one thing that is really difficult to do in a custom build once you built your computer. It's the last thing you want to change. You have to rip out all of your parts, and then what do you do with a used case? They're too big and cumbersome and they don't hold their value. You're not going to ship it anywhere. Spend an extra $20, $25, get yourself a nice case. I very much do like this. So that's the parts overview out of the way. Let's talk about who should build and who should buy. But before we even do that, let me get the elephant out of the room right up front, or rather halfway through the video. I should have probably said this at the beginning, but hey, if you're still here, thank you. Gold star for all of you still watching. Objectively speaking, if you offered me both of these computers, already built, already assembled, sitting here on the desk, and you said, hey, they're the same price, they're ready to go, which one would you like? 10 times out of 10, there is zero doubt in my mind. The answer should be completely transparent. You would take the Ryzen 5 2600X with 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte SSD all day long and twice on Sunday. There is no comparison when it comes to the component level choices here on an equal price already assembled basis. But of course that leaves out several key points. Already assembled basis, and that assumes that you don't value keyboard, mouse, Windows, and Wi-Fi adapter, which are here and not here. They're not terribly expensive to add, but do be aware at that $900 price point, they are missing. Oh yeah, building the computer. This brings us to who should buy a pre-built. In my opinion, if you don't currently have a working computer, or you're planning on selling your current computer, or your current computer is so old that none of the components are compatible with a modern system. Your current computer has DDR3 RAM, for example, instead of DDR4. Your current computer has an old chipset, an old motherboard. Maybe you don't even have a video card. Maybe you have an old Acer or Dell pre-built and you're just using integrated graphics. If you have such a computer, then when it comes to building your own, you effectively don't have a computer except for maybe making a Windows USB install driver, perhaps downloading a driver or two. But you effectively don't have a useful computer for diagnosing and figuring out problems should you run into them. Now, if you have a room full of computers, or in my case, a shelf full of spare computer parts, then running into troubles when you build a computer is not a big deal. I have had it happen to me, not just in my personal life, but even on this channel. Last year, when I built my current streaming PC, the i7-8700K Cadillac build, the $2,000 build, that has a 240 millimeter liquid cooler in it. I was putting the computer together, got everything assembled, plugged it in, turned it on, and there was an awful noise coming from the liquid cooler. It turns out it was a defective pump. The pump on the blockhead that sits onto the CPU itself was making a terrible noise, and it was clear it was not working. Not a problem. I walked over to my shelf, I grabbed another 240 millimeter liquid cooler, I swapped them out. That's in the video, by the way. I mentioned that in the follow-up videos to that build series, and I was off to the races. No problem. What do you plan to do if that happens to you? Now, in fairness, with a liquid cooler, if it's obvious it's a liquid cooler, you can take it back out and return it to Amazon or Newegg or wherever you bought it from, and they'll replace it. You get another one. Build your computer within 30 days of buying all your parts, and everything's in return. You don't have to worry about it. But it is a pain in the neck. Here's what's really worse. You put everything together, you turn it on, and it doesn't work at all. It doesn't even power on. Is the RAM defective? Is the motherboard defective? Is the power supply defective? If you have no spare parts, how do you know? What do you replace? What do you do to get it working? Now that's one possibility. The next possibility is you turn it on, you put your USB thumb drive in, you start installing Windows or Linux, take your pick, and it boots up and it appears to work, and then it randomly freezes or it blue screens. Now what? Is it your RAM? Is it your video card? Is it your motherboard? Did you wire something wrong? What's wrong with the system? Now you have to be your own tech support, and if you don't have spare parts, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen posts beneath my YouTube videos, tweeted at me on Twitter, posted over on the Tech Deals Discord, where people have said, I'm having this problem, or my computer's not running right, or this program crashes, or I get a blue screen, at least once a week, or my system's freezing. Is it overheating? Are my drivers bad? Is there something wrong with my video card? Well, first of all, I have no idea. I'm not there in front of it. It's virtually impossible to properly diagnose a computer, and certainly not via text. If we were talking on the telephone, no, I don't offer tech support over the phone, sorry. But if we were talking on the phone, at least I could run you through some basic troubleshooting tips. Better if I'm in front of the computer. I always like touching the machine that I'm working on. I never like doing remote support. Back when I used to do IT consulting for businesses, I never liked doing stuff over the telephone. Oftentimes, if it was more than 3 or 5 minutes, it's like, look, let me run over and stop by the office. I'll be there in a couple of hours. Let me just take a look at it. Because oftentimes when I'm in front of it, I can fix it in 5 minutes, where we could spend half an hour on the phone running around in circles, just having communication issues trying to have you explain stuff to me over the phone. When you have an army of spare parts, building computers is fun, enjoyable, and frankly, relatively trouble-free. Even if you find you have defective parts, even if the machine doesn't boot or blue screens, I can swap the part until it works. If you don't have that environment, consider this. You go onto Amazon, you order this $900 computer. Is it quite maybe not as good as you could custom build? Yes. You are paying CyberPower a small profit margin to build it for you and provide universal warranty support. So you get it, you spend your $900, UPS or FedEx shows up, they drop it off at your door, deliver it to your office, whatever. You take it out of the box, you plug it in, you turn it on, and nothing happens. And then you remember to reach around back and press the power switch because there's a physical power switch on the back of the power supply. Once you turn that on, you hit the power button, and still nothing happens. And yes, it's plugged into the wall, and yes, you think you've done everything, and you've taken the foam out, and crap, now what? Guess what? It's not your problem. Hello, Amazon customer service? Yes, computer no worky, send me another one. Amazon will provide you with a prepaid return shipping label, put it back in the box, send it back to them. They will overnight you a replacement. They'll get a brand new computer. It's not your problem. Plug it in, turn it on, and well, frankly, the odds of having 2 defective ones in a row are very, very small. Now, let's say you turn it on, you boot it up, and you start using it. And 4 or 5 hours later, it just freezes. That's odd. Okay, so you reset it, you use it some more, and the next day, it freezes. That's strange. Okay, you check your settings, your drivers are up to date, you haven't installed any weird programs, but like maybe once a day or once every other day, the machine just hard freezes. Return it. Get another one. Something weird is wrong. The RAM's bad, the motherboard's bad, something's wrong. It happens. Any mass-produced product is going to have that. Hello, Amazon, yes, computer no worky, send me another one, please. They will provide you with a return shipping label. Now, do keep in mind, if you have data on it, make sure you wipe the drive. There's a video on my channel about how to sell or basically recycle computers. It involves basically going into the control panel, into recovery, and doing a complete system restore. It returns Windows to the default shipping state, and there's an option in there that says, don't keep my data. In fact, there's even an option in there for high security wiping of the drive to make sure all the data is permanently destroyed. So be sure you do that before you return the machine if at all possible. And then basically you get a brand new computer and it's not your problem. Once about 30 to 45 days have passed from when you order the computer, technically it's 30 days with Amazon, but if you ask them 10 days after, if you contact their support and ask them nicely, they're not going to give you a hard time about it in my experience. Then you have support through CyberPower. Now they have US-based customer service and they do have an 800 number you can call. And they're not going to blame you for, is it the motherboard, the RAM, the video card, etc. You see, if you have a problem with a custom build and let's say you call up MSI and say, I think my motherboard's bad. Oh, well, what have you done? Or worse, let's say you get an RMA number and you send your motherboard back to MSI and they test it and say, nope, your motherboard works fine. Their job is not to provide tech support for your whole computer. They'll send you back the motherboard. You could put yourself in a position where your computer is perpetually out of action as you try to diagnose the problem. If I sound like I'm overhyping computer problems, maybe a little bit. I'll acknowledge that most computers work fine on day one. Most computers that I have built, both recently and frankly throughout the history of my computer career, which dates back a long, long time, most computers work on day one. And if you're okay to take that gamble, if you're okay to buy a random collection of parts, put them together, turn the power button on, and go, you know what, 99 times out of 100, it's going to work perfectly. And I'm okay to take that chance that one time out of 100, it won't. I am not saying this to talk you out of building a computer. Many people view building a computer as a fun hobby. If you want to do it, by all means do. I just want you to go into it with open eyes and be aware of the risks. Maybe you've built 2 or 3 computers in the past and right now you're staring at the computer screen, looking at me saying, what are you talking about? I've built 3 computers and they all worked fine. You're crazy. Yes, and you could probably build 50 computers. And frankly, you probably have a 50-50 chance of all 50 of them working perfectly the first time. And if one of them doesn't work, well then 49 out of 50 work just fine. But if it doesn't, you have a headache on your hands. Can you afford to buy extra parts or find a computer shop or find somebody with parts and spend a lot of your time figuring out the problem? More than anything else, that is one of the biggest appeals to buying something like that. And that leads me into, do you want to build a computer? If you see building a computer as a chore, oh, for Pete's sakes, for the relatively small amount of money that CyberPower is charging, maybe a $100 profit margin in this, once you add keyboard, mouse, Wi-Fi adapter, and it's a good AC Wi-Fi module with Bluetooth, once you add that and then the copy of Windows, they've got about $100 worth of profit margin in here for them over the retail cost of the parts. Give CyberPower the $100, let them build the computer for you, turn it on, plug it in, and be ready to go. When I first turned this on, the actual Windows setup process took 5 minutes, Windows Update took another 5 or 10 minutes to run through all of its updates, and then Windows was fully up to date. This particular machine was so fresh, it came with the latest version of NVIDIA drivers on it. The 1660 Ti is so new, this came with the .35 drivers on it, which at least as of the recording of this video, are the current drivers. So even the NVIDIA drivers nothing else needed updating. It was ready to go. Inside of 15 minutes, no exaggeration, from plugging this in, it was ready to install whatever games you want to install. Install Steam or Fortnite or whatever you want to put on here, it was ready to go. I don't believe you're going to build this computer, install Windows, and have everything ready to go in 15 minutes. So there's something to be said there. So if you view this as a chore, skip it. Give CyberPower the $100 and move on with your life. On the other hand, if this is a hobby, if spending your Saturday afternoon doing this is fun for you, by all means, don't buy one of these. Build a computer. I absolutely understand. I've bought computers in my life. I've built computers. I get it. These each have a place in the market. Which one is right for you depends entirely upon who you are. Don't feel bad either if you aren't wanting to build a computer. If this doesn't necessarily appeal, or you're busy, or maybe you've got 2 jobs or a family or 27 other obligations in your life, you're like, I wouldn't mind building a computer, but I don't have the time and I'll buy the parts and they'll sit there for 2 weeks. Don't feel bad about paying CyberPower $100 to build your computer for you. There's a lot of things you can do in your life that you choose not to because frankly, it isn't worth your time. It's not what you specialize in. It's not what you're good at. And you can't do everything in your life. You didn't build your own home. You didn't build your own car. You probably didn't build your own furniture. You certainly didn't build your television. You don't have to build your own computer. It can be fun, but you don't have to. I kind of liken building a computer to maybe doing 4 or 5 oil changes on your car. I can absolutely go down to AutoZone and I can buy the oil and buy the filter, and for 10 or 15 bucks, I can change the oil in my car. Changing the oil in your car is not hard on most vehicles. Some, okay, it can be really difficult, but you can find the manuals online, you can find the instructions and YouTube videos, and you can do it yourself. Or you can go down to the Quickie Lube or the Jiffy Lube or your dealership and you can pay your 30 bucks or whatever they charge, some 40, whatever, depends on kind of oil, depends upon if it's dealer or not. And you can pay them and they'll do it for you in 15 minutes. Is it worth the extra 15 or 20 bucks to pay them to do it? That depends upon whether you want to change the oil in your car. That depends upon whether you want to be liable for the problems. Same thing with this. If the oil leaks out of the bottom of your car when you're driving down the road and you blow up your engine, if you paid a shop to do it, guess what? The shop's buying you a new engine. If you do it yourself and that happens, you're buying you a new engine. Although that's not likely to happen if you're at least remotely careful about the process. And you can take the oil down to recycling centers and get it recycled and whatnot, so it's not a huge deal. But I pay somebody to change the oil in my car because it's just not necessary. It's for the relatively small amount of money, they'll have it done in 15 minutes and they have the liability if anything goes wrong. So I realize I'm beating the dead horse there a bit, but I want everybody watching to understand that both of these are viable options depending upon what it is that you need. So we've talked about who should do each of these. We've talked about the various components in both sets of machines. Let me talk about customization for a minute. First of all, I actually want to start off with the CyberPowerPC and talking about customization. I have already made changes to this machine because, well, I can, and because it gives me an opportunity to show what could be done with it. I've already upgraded the RAM to 16 gigabytes of RAM. There's now 2 sticks in there. You don't have to replace both. You can buy a single 8 gigabyte stick. I actually don't have a single 8 gigabyte stick, so I just put in a matched set of 16 gigabytes of RAM, but it doesn't matter. You can do it either way. I've also added an additional SSD because 120 gigabytes isn't enough for my needs. There are 2 M.2 slots right on the board, so it just screws right in. It does not, however, come with the screws you need to put the drives in. Some M.2 SSDs do come with screws, most don't. You can get those locally, or maybe you have one from an old motherboard box or whatnot. I have a whole shelf of them from all the boards I have, so I put that in. There's also a 2.5-inch tray mounted right up here, and so you can get a 2.5-inch SSD and just mount it right in here. You'll just need a data cable, and then you'll just need to fish out a power cable from the back. The other change I made is I took the 120 gig SSD out. It's a Western Digital Green, it's a budget drive, and it's a very, very small boot drive. For my own purposes and what I do with my computers, it's a little bit small for me. So I took that drive out and I replaced it with a 480 gigabyte 2.5-inch SATA SSD, which is mounted down there in the bottom at the moment. But otherwise, the machine is as it came. The video card, motherboard, everything else is the same. I haven't changed it. So you can customize a pre-built machine like this, be it a CyberPowerPC, an iBuyPower, an Origin Systems, or frankly, any of the other boutique style makers. Dells, Acers, HPs, no, but stuff like this you can't. It's worth noting that CPU can be upgraded. In the future, if you find a deal, maybe they're discounted, maybe there's a new model out that works on 300 series boards, you can put an i9-9900K in here. It won't overclock, but it doesn't matter. You wouldn't overclock on a board like that anyway. It doesn't have the power delivery, but 4.7 gigahertz on all 8-core 16 threads, you'd need new cooler. That cooler wouldn't be enough. A Hyper 212 Evo or a Hyper 612 would be sufficient. Some mid-range $30-ish cooler would be enough. So you could do that. I've done that in the past. The very first CyberPowerPC that I ever reviewed had an i5-9400P CPU, which is a really weird product name, but it's 100 megahertz faster than an i5-9400. That computer is my oldest son's. He's 13 years old and he still uses that computer at home. We've made a bunch of changes to it since then, including, and there's a video on my channel, we upgraded the CPU on the B150 board that's in that system to an i7-7700K. We put a Hyper 212 Evo on there. It runs at 4.2 gigahertz on all the cores in everything, cool and quiet on a B150, no complaints. I did test its performance next to my own custom build 7700K, which has a Z270 ASUS ROG Strix motherboard. That's like a $200 motherboard versus a $60 motherboard. You know how much performance difference stock to stock a 7700K is between a super premium expensive $200 board and a $60 El Cheapo board in a pre-built CyberPowerPC? None. 4.2 gigahertz is 4.2 gigahertz. The motherboard doesn't affect the performance. It's just whether you can overclock. Now, you can overclock my custom build, but that's a lot of money to spend for a couple hundred more megahertz, or well, actually 5 gigahertz in that case, but who's counting? For most cases, it doesn't really matter. So we did that, and you can do that in this over time. You can even replace the entire motherboard. 2, 3, 4 years from now, it's a standard case. You can replace the power supply, add RAM, change the graphics card. There is plenty of room in here to install an RTX 2070, or well, you could do a 2080. It's a bit much for that CPU unless you change that as well. But there's room in here to make those changes in the future if you want to. So that's pretty nice. Where you really get into customization options, however, are custom builds. Some of you watching this may have already gone down to the comment section and left a comment saying, "Tech, you're crazy. That's not how I would spend $900. Good for you. If you disagree with me, don't. Custom PCs are custom. Build it however the heck you want. You might be watching this saying, wait a minute, a terabyte of SSD space? What a waste of money. I don't care. I'd put in a 250 gig SSD and a cheap 1 terabyte hard drive, and I'd go with a Ryzen 7 2700 or 2700X. You'd use the money there instead. Or maybe you think that 16 gigs is unnecessary. I deeply disagree with you there, but hey, your computer, do what you want. 8 gigs of RAM, smaller SSD, Ryzen 7 2700X, you get 8 core 16 threads. Maybe you think the power supply is not big enough. Maybe you want a 650 watt 80 plus gold because power costs a lot where you live. Maybe you don't like this case. You want a different case. You want something larger, smaller, wider. You want no RGB, whatever. It's your PC, build it your way. To be completely blunt, at $900, you could put a better graphics card in here too. Lower the motherboard down just a bit. Maybe go to the non-X version of the chip. At the moment when I'm filming this video, the 2600 non-X is only $20 cheaper. I don't think it's worth saving 20 bucks when they're that close. You get a smaller cooler and a lower boost and a lower turbo speed on the non-X chip. For 20 bucks, just buy the X chip. But yeah, that's personal choice. Maybe you buy less SSD space, less RAM, and instead you get maybe a Vega 56 or Vega 64. Maybe you get an RTX 2060 or RTX 2070. I did a build in November of 2018 with a Ryzen 7 1700X first gen on a 300 series board, and I managed to squeeze an RTX 2070 in the build, and it will absolutely demolish a GTX 1660 Ti. But a lot of other compromises were made in that build, and some of those parts were not bought at normal prices. I paid $149 for that CPU. I paid $29 for the liquid cooler and $29 for the case. I got amazing deals for them, and I detailed that in the video. So that's not a normal build. But if you price shop and you pick and choose your deals over time, you can customize it and do whatever you want. So if you're racing down to the comments to say, well, I wouldn't do it this way, or I would get a different video card, or I would do it, great. This is a suggested build. This is a suggested balanced build that gives you a powerful graphics card, a quality motherboard for future upgrades. Zen 2 is coming this summer. 3rd and 4th gen chips over the next 18 months will all install on this motherboard. So you could start with a Ryzen 5 2600 or 2600X in this case because it's 20 bucks more, and you could go to an 8 or even 12 core CPU in the future that's maybe closer to 5 gigahertz without changing your motherboard. That's pretty sweet. You could certainly upgrade the graphics card in the future. If you ever wanted to, for example, take this to say an RTX 2080 or 2080 Ti, put a better power supply in. This is an appropriate power supply for this, but it's not if you're spending over $500 for a video card. The point is, build this however you want. This is a suggested balanced build where I think the video card and the CPU, all of this goes really nicely, except maybe the motherboard's a little overstretched for the build. But I mentioned that earlier when I said that I would put the B450 in here. I just don't have a B450. MSI sent me this as a product sample. It's what was on the shelf. It's $30 more than the B450 Gaming Plus, so that's why I'm using it. Coming up soon are going to be a slew of videos on this. First of all, build video on this process. I haven't done a mid-range build video in a while, so I will do this Ryzen 5 2600 build. And then I'm going to have a benchmark video. I'm not going to stretch it out to like 27 videos, but I am going to test a lot of games. Let me know in the comment section down below which games you'd like to see tested. I did a video with the Ryzen 5 2600 and RX 580, and I did either 13 or 16 games on it, and that was very popular, having all the games in one video. So my plan is to do that again, except I'm going to do both of these machines head to head. Two reasons. Number one, it'll show the performance difference of a $900 pre-built versus a $900 custom build. Roughly the same graphics card, although the Gaming X is probably a little bit better than the Zotac, but it will also show i5-9400 versus the Ryzen 5 2600X, which frankly I think a lot of people have been wanting to see as well. So let me know in the comments below which games you want to see tested, and that'll be coming up very soon. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with a big huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions in the comment section down below. Hit the bell notification icon to be notified when new videos are coming out. Hit the join button next to the bell icon to become a Tech Deals member and support the channel. That provides direct financial support to this channel. It lets me make more of this content for you. I do get some stuff sent to me as product samples. This motherboard from MSI, for example, was sent to me. The video card was not, however. I did buy this with my own money here. The RAM and the SSD were both provided by AData, so I get a few things sent to me, but I do buy a lot of stuff as well, and your support will help me continue to buy most of the stuff that I review and keep me independent, because if I'm dependent on all product samples, well, that's just not a good thing. Links down in the video description below are another great way to support the channel. Most of those links are affiliate links. Amazon, eBay, Newegg, etc. are all affiliate links. Whether you buy this or build a computer or just need a few components, whatever it is that you buy, using those while you shop directly supports the channel at no extra cost to you, and it is greatly appreciated. You'll also find my social media links, most especially Twitter down there, and Discord for Deal Nation members. Thank you so much for watching. I will see all of you next time.